Oh, welcome to this pre-game discussion on Madagascar. It is Halloween, and you can see that Norse map is celebrating Halloween. It's a little annoying, but I'll tolerate it. So, we finally saw the reform that we were talking about with voting age, etc. And it's been done by the Finnish ministry roughly as badly as we anticipated it to be. They are sidestepping the voting age question and going straight for the age of consent, which I expected them to do, but I'm still sad about it because you can't really have sex with someone who can't vote. So that's the real age of consent. The Finnish social ministry or Ministry of Social Affairs or whatever is proposing a reform package of laws that I can tell are inspired by my thing. And they're going to get absolutely flamed for it because these laws are not designed to be done to such an extreme that I'm taking them, as I have said many, many times. You can, if you are intending to make a cover for this movement, you can very specifically do so. But then please understand that you're making a cover and not something we can progress with, because the Finnish ministry is saying things like even mild forms of sexual abuse should get a minimum of 2 years in prison instead of 1 year suspended sentence or parole in the American parlance. And that there were other reforms into it, like harshening of the one person being in a supervisory position towards the other punishments, and removing some wordings like it's not exactly like illegal possession of a woman that the old wording was, but it's pretty close. It's pretty medieval wording, to be honest. They are changing some of the wordings, and they added a clause where if a 12-year-old and an adult have had a sexual relationship and it is frowned upon by society as in general, the validity of their claim of one partner volunteering can only be assessed by the court, not by any individual. So the normal technical age of consent without having to go through courts would still be 16, or I think 15, 16. I can't remember the current legal age. But if there is a case where one party is a minor and another party is considered to be in the false, the minor can, if they are over the age of 12, be considered a court witness for their own voluntariness. So this got in the discussion turned into an age of consent of 12, which the law isn't actually saying. It's saying that in the rare case where both partners and their families are saying that it is a legal relationship, in such a case only, if the younger partner is above 12 and can be considered in a court to testify in the case, then they can go without punishment. But if you are like a 25-year-old and you bang a 13-year-old and you don't want to put the process through court, then you are instantly a criminal. specifically said that it's only possible to get the 12-year-olds' rights if they go through court and not through public opinion. So every case would have to be assessed by the court for its, let's say, loving nature, instead of like normal street opinion. And this is very specifically, I believe, because there have been some cases in Finland where there have been 17-year-olds and 15-year-olds who have gotten into a relationship, and they've testified in court that the younger partner, who was something along the lines of 15, 13, 14, old enough to be in a relationship with a 16-year-old, but still frowned upon. And they have both testified in court that it was a true relationship and not a rape. Both partners have gotten their entire families involved in the case, and neither has at any point shown hostility towards the other. And we have documents from psychiatrics and developmental, developmental experts in human development, saying that the two partners are essentially equal and neither has the upper hand in the emotions of the situation, and they should be treated as equally developed. And in such cases, the court has been mandated to break it up. And it's not designed for 30 or 50-year-olds banging 12-year-olds, because due to the wording of the law, you need a parental consent from basically both sides. It isn't discriminatory against orphans, but it isn't discriminatory against orphans. So in that you'd need specifically a parental thing to it, but it is clearly in its wording designed to make it possible in cases where both families agree that it is a love pairing for the court to take the younger person's opinion into account instead of automatically saying that it is a rape. And the wording also contained things like harshening prison sentences, making mandatory minimums for rapes, because there have been a lot of cases, especially in East Finland, where there have been cases of literally 50-year-olds raping 13-year-olds, like literally raping them, not in some kind of romantic situation, and they've gotten out with parole because the courts are courts. So that has, in one of the law's justifications, got to change. So they are making mandatory minimums for rapes of 2 years prison time, of which you need to serve at least 2/3, even if you're a first timer, and things of that nature. The ministry specifically said that as its overall, like what it actually does to the sexual crimes, it is expected to harshen the punishments rather severely. It is also expected to make things along the lines of clearer. And the ministry was a little surprised that people took it to mean that the age of consent is 12, because it isn't. It is, if it goes to court, and in court, as in if you are found as an adult in the bed of, say, a 14-year-old, and you say this is love, and they say this is love, and you don't want the police to do its thing about this. You don't want the normal procedure. You want literally the community to know. You are willing to push laws here. You are literally saying that you are willing to go through the courts and your partner agrees with you. It is in such cases possible, but the reality is that if you don't want to go through court, in such a case, you'd get the 2-year suspended sentence, but you'd get it handed down from essentially the police instead of the judge. It requires in the wording specific desire by the younger one and their families to take it to a court to avoid the general sentence. It wouldn't lower it so that anybody can go and bang a 12-year-old. It would, for example, if you are a tourist into our country and you are trying to bang a 12-year-old, if you get caught with it, you would not be able to feasibly do the 2 years in prison as harshly as you would the possibly 5 years of time it takes for the courts to debate, because the courts are notoriously slow. So in a case where you just want to get back to your home country quickly, you would take the police handing out the sentence and shrug. For example, it wouldn't be possible for an adult to bang a 12-year-old without going through the court. The court would go case by case and decide whether or not it is appropriate at that case. That is the law's intent, as far as I understand. It is a preliminary emancipation style law, meaning that if other conditions align and the only thing supporting it, the act's interpretation as a crime, is that the society thinks so, but both families and both participants don't think so, then we can theoretically rest on the judgment of the partners in the act. But there are such conditions as the parents knowing, for example. There are such conditions. You can't do so without the parents' permission. You would automatically be a criminal. That is the wording of the law as far as I understand it. Currently, you can bang a 15, or was it 16? I think it's 15-year-old if you're 50-year-old without the parents' awareness. And I believe, but I'm not completely fluently expert on this law, that would end. That you could bang a 13 or 12-year-old if you had the parents' consent and the situation was suitable for it in the legal sense, that you could get the emancipation if it goes to court. But you would, for example, no longer as a 30-year-old be able to bang a 17-year-old without the same emancipation style court action. That is what I'm getting from it, but I cannot be sure. But this law, according to the ministry that was proposing it, seems to be kind of in the ballpark of what I meant with my law, but it is more well, let's just say it takes it a little bit further than my law did, but let's leave it at that. They are also taking it very slow, very, very slow. They had a preliminary meeting about it in, I believe, last year, and they debated it, sent it out to the different non-governmental organizations like Judges Union, Police Union, Women's Union, Children's Union. They sent it out to the unions and got their replies and debated it some more, I believe along the order of a year almost. And then sent it out after the debate for another round of reviews, and it's going to be, if I recall correctly, along the lines of 6 months of discussion with the NGOs and what they like about the law, what they don't like about the law, where the wording should change, and so on. And from what I can gather, it is better than the previous law, but not enough that it would pass automatically. It seems to make every group a little bit happier, while every group finds something they dislike about it. It seems to be a good compromise candidate. But with such compromise candidates, there has to be a level of benefit for the whole nation before adopting it is smart, because then you would consistently be changing the laws, like for little benefits here and little benefits there. And it is looking like if the NGOs don't really tack on something that benefits the public at large, that it probably won't pass. Probably won't pass. If I got this correctly, what they were saying, and I can't guarantee it because there wasn't a lot of information and it was through the yellow paper, so I'd have to read what the officials said and so on and so forth, and it might be hundreds or even thousands of pages of actual text to see what they mean by the law. But if I got it correctly from the yellow pages, they're making cases that go to court of sexual abuse of a minor. They're making people older than 12 be able to testify in court whether or not they were voluntary. And they are, far as I know, harshening the punishments so that there would be more cases in court. And they are making mandatory minimums. For the lowest degree of rape, the punishment got doubled, for example. The lowest, I think it was supposed to be something along the lines of inappropriate sexual conduct or something. I can't recall the exact wording of it, but something that to normal people says fully clothed, public space, stuff like that. And that is being increased from a minimum of 1 year to 2 years. They are making it so that 12-year-olds can testify in court. And they are making it so that if you don't want to take it to court where you get caught and you just want to hush it up, then you would automatically get the minimum sentence and they would do the thing with you. You would get the minimum sentence and the police waifu, if I believe that is what they are aiming for. You would get the 20-year-old police officer that looks like she's 13, because that's from this side of the law. And other topics that I have heard about is that people completely misunderstand why countries that produce a lot of wind power buy a lot of water power. They completely misunderstand that. Actually, I can't put this on yet. They completely misunderstand that. Over 90% of our wind power batteries are water batteries. They are dams where you pump water from the lower part of the dam to the higher part of the dam. That is over 90% of our wind and renewable power storage. So, due to the fact that Norway has a lot of water power because they have a lot of very high lakes and rivers, Denmark, when the price of electricity is very low, sells it to Norway, and Norway doesn't run those dams and keeps the water building up. And when the power of cost of electricity is high, because renewables aren't working during that period, for example, during a cold spell or no wind or whatever, they buy electricity from the Norwegian dams. And this in the online community is taken to mean that wind doesn't work, when it's actually exactly what wind does when it works. You sell it when your production is more than your consumption, and you buy usually water from your neighbor when it's the other way around. That's the way it works. And I think this happened back in the 60s and 80s, but it's finally starting to be so apparent that everybody's starting to see it. Finally starting to colonize the ocean surface. There are some spots in the planet, when you look at a light map or energy generation map or something, where you notice that there's a lot of activity in the North Sea and some areas of the East Asian seas. You notice that there's a lot of activity there, and we're finally starting to colonize the oceans. Considering 70% of this planet is ocean, it's going to take a while. And what I'm waiting for right now in terms of space colonization is for somebody to start a service center in Antarctica, because there's year-round anywhere between a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand people living in Antarctica, the South Pole. Very specifically the South Pole year-round. And when it's winter, they can't get anything. They can't get evacuation flights. They can't get food. They can't get anything. So they have to store it. I'm waiting for somebody to open up a service center, a shopping mart in South Pole, so that they can get emergency services delivered and like spare organs and spare food and spare parts and stuff like that to their bases when they really need it. So it would be the first sign of an actual colony. Now it's just science stations that are supplied when they are supplied. If they get the first shopping mall, then I believe we can legitimately consider the South Pole to be colonized, to be habitable, perhaps. If you can go there and during the 6 months winter when it's minus 80 degrees Celsius, pick up a phone in your little teepee and call the center, and in like a day they fly a plane to you, and you spend the rest of the 6 months in a nice hotel room in some service center, then it's done. Then we can start practicing truly for the colonization of space objects by going to the South Pole, which would be the most uninhabitable part of the planet, save for the ocean bottom or underground, but planet surface. That would be when we are ready to do the Mars thing. I wouldn't start colonizing Mars until we have the South Pole. And oceans have been started to be colonized for 20 to 40 years, so I believe they are well on their way. But South Pole is next logical. And because we have a lot of research stations, it's a matter of somebody building an actual service station there. Would be a couple of 100 million to low billion. Something that can do flights and landings in the middle of the winter. That would require some technical breakthroughs. But I think it would be possible. Then we can start talking about Mars. I believe the space junk pickup satellites are going well. Their research is progressing pretty well. We could put a tiny bit more effort into it, but I think overall they're doing pretty well. And we need to pick up every satellite that has been discontinued from active use from Earth orbit and either deorbit them or, in my opinion, preferably take them to such a high orbit that we can use them for parts later. I believe that would be preferable, but we need to immediately get them out of collision orbit. It's like driving on a road where 50% of the cars are driving at the same speed as you without a driver randomly based on last instructions. Like ghost cars on the highway at 200 miles an hour without brakes. So if one of them happens to crash and cause an actual blockage, all the others will crash into it. It's like 1/3 to 2/3 of all active cars being like that. It's like a 30% chance of when you listen to music getting shot in the head. It's like a 30% chance. If you randomly pick an object that go like that one, 30% chance that it's just a very fast flying bullet. So we're gonna build in Madagascar as our next important item after we get the budget review in. We're gonna build a solar power plant that should produce 3 terawatts, and our consumption is about 2, and all the other power plants together produce about 1.9. And solar should producing on its own about 3. And nuclear produces about 30, but it's so insanely expensive to build, even though it's very cheap to maintain once it's built, that due to the fuel cost being so low, that it's not in our budget. Once we have the solar built, we're gonna take the least producing renewable and build it, because we are trying to keep a well-distributed power production model instead of relying on any one source. And it might be geothermal or biomass. And we aren't going to produce more coal. We have one coal plant. And when we started at 0.4 megatons a year, I think, or it could be even lower than that, but let's go with 0.4 megatons a year. And once it hits 0.3 megatons, we're going to allow non-conventional oil and gas resources. But it requires it to be the CO2 production to be going down and being at least 25% lower than what we started with. And that's kind of how I plan to solve this environmental crisis, so that anytime you clean up your country sufficiently, you get access to the more polluting resources, which, because you're already successful at cleaning your country, should be no problem for you to keep clean despite them being polluting. So keep your country clean and gain access to more energy resources, to put it in short wording. We are almost steady in our rate of reforestation. The deforestation rate is going down at almost exactly the same speed, regardless of our taxation policy. So I believe what this model is saying is that even after we adopt to the most green policy that we can with regard to these decisions, there's going to be an adjustment period that's going to take some time to get all the numbers and data going the right direction. So even if we increase the tax on deforestation, we're not going to see an immediate reforestation. We're going to see a slowdown of deforestation until it slowly turns positive, even if we increase it by an insane amount. Which means that there are these, what you might call long-term projects, which cannot be paused even though taxation is an hindrance. You know, things like building a road that requires you to cut through a forest. Once the building has been started, you can make sure that the next one doesn't bother the forest, but this one has to be built. And things like that. Once we are reforesting and our CO2 is either neutral or negative, then I'll be content. We built a lot of those carbon capture things, but they ended up being pretty expensive for our country. Knocked the budget a little bit, but not much. So we will not be able to produce those. We will be much better off doing this through carbon taxation and reduction of transport costs, and at the same time doing the cars to electric or renewable. We're going to be better off doing that. The number of cars is increasing, while at the same time the number of cars on renewable basis is increasing faster. So we are doing good. The internet connections are still junk. They're still pretty much junk, but they're getting there. I think a lot of people have, in my astral at least, adopted to following this Madagascar as primary. So I'm gonna do some things that I've been putting off, and then I'm gonna play the Madagascar one. And we are currently in campaign season, and I've never played this during campaign season before. So I don't know if I lose the election, will it allow me to continue as the leader through the God and Spy mode, the developer tools. But I will try. I don't know how it will go. I hope it will allow me to remain the leader. But last time when I had the final debate, I didn't know that it only allows you to pick one change per topic that you have to support. So since I started with the one that required only one building, that was not very supported. I got very little support and I tied the speeches, but this time if I manage to do them well, I should come out ahead and I'll see what I can do. This election period is annoying because you can't change anything. You can only make a campaign promise that you'll change it. It's very annoying. So 3 months out of like 2-3 years, you have to keep making just campaign promises. That's very annoying, especially if it doesn't allow me to continue with the new leader. That will be very annoying. Knock, knock. So, that I believe is all. We will focus on improving probably education before healthcare, because education increases our farming capacity quicker, and we are having a chronic malnutrition thing, which is actually very bad for the health. So even if we increase the health, but people will remain malnourished, it won't be very good. So we'll probably improve education first, and then the malnourishment situation, and then healthcare. But first thing first is the solar power plant. So thank you for tuning into this discussion. I hope it wasn't too rough for you. We will be back in about 2 hours.